Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the HumanizeHer podcast. I'm your host, Erica Lockheimer, and I couldn't be more excited to be with you today. This is truly a movement and also a passion project of mine to celebrate women's voices, their stories, their endeavors, their challenges, all of it. We are going to have so much fun together learning about all of them. Let's do this and dive in. Today, we're diving deep into the world of company culture and talent with a true leader in the field, Linda Aiello. Linda is the Chief People Officer at DraftKings, where she leads all aspects of the employee experience for the online sports, entertainment, and gaming giant. She's responsible for finding and growing top talent, developing future leaders, and fostering a diverse and inclusive workplace, which is crucial for any successful company. She's held CPO roles at major companies like Qurate Retail Group and Stitch Fix, and spent years leading employee success initiatives at Salesforce, Uber, and Louis Vuitton. She's also been recognized as a top HR professional by the National Diversity Council. Please join me and my co-host Elizabeth as we dive into Linda's insights on building winning teams and creating a thriving company culture. Thank you so much for coming, Linda. It's such an honor to have you here today.
I am delighted to be here. I was so excited when you reached out, and I was excited to see you again.
And our personal connection is just amazing. We met at South by Southwest, and we were on a panel together. And I'm trying to remember how many years ago that was.
2022.
Yeah, you went with me too.
I went with you. Yeah.
2022.
Yeah. And it was hilarious because you walked into the room. And you two were identical
we
twins.
dressed exactly the same.
We did.
We literally, I remember our outfit,
so
and I was
funny.
just like, I instantly, because it was in the prep room.
Yeah.
And like all the speakers get there. And then I looked at you, I'm like, at first I'm like, she stole my outfit. But then I was like, but she looks cute. That means I look cute.
I was like, wow, she's got a great outfit. I'm like, oh, that's my
She
outfit.
looks just like me. The blue dress with the
I remember
sneaks.
just being paranoid that no one was going to come to our session because Beto O'Rourke was doing a session at our same time. And I'm like,
Why?
well, I guess they're not going to come talk about, want to listen to people talking about women in business, et cetera, and trying to recruit and trying to sort of change the face of leadership in companies. And then lo and behold, he was in the room next to us.
No.
So I think we got plenty of people who wanted to come see, but we also got overflow from Beto.
Thank goodness.
I know, right?
That
So I was
worked out.
teased. It wasn't the session they wanted to go to, but it was the session they needed to go to. So
Absolutely.
I was
Love
very, very pleased.
Yeah, it was a fun session, and we even had some really interesting questions towards the end.
We
Do
did.
you remember? Yeah,
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
We were talking about hiring and making sure you have a diverse talent pool. And do you remember that question of that one man?
I remember
I got chills.
I remember being terrified because you have this moment you're like, you just don't know what to expect. And so often when we're doing corporate events and stuff, we know some of the questions beforehand. We're briefed, we're prepped, we've had time to think. And then there are moments where you go into these and people stand up and you're like, oh, who's taking that
question?
I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
It's touchy.
Yeah.
It's good for us to be sort of shaken in those moments and get the things that are unexpected, because that's our reality of our day every day.
Yeah.
We just appear more polished.
Yeah, no, we do. We're like,
well,
well, because he had asked, he's like, because we were talking about hiring and diversity, and he said, so I don't think a woman should just have a different score or something and be hired.
Right.
And are you playing favoritism? And it was just this whole, like in our, approach, which I actually appreciate, the challenge in a lot of ways, because I think people look at it in a different way. And it's like, none of us want to be hired because we're a woman.
Correct.
So absolutely, the way you're thinking about it is absolutely wrong. So I'm actually glad you asked the question, and let's talk about what it means to actually hire diverse folks in your team.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like that of any additional check marks just because you're a woman.
Right. I had a leader at a previous company, and I remember we were standing in the kitchen and I was making my peppermint tea and he was grabbing coffee, and he said to me, I'm really frustrated because I'm not going to be able to be promoted. And I said, why won't you be able to be promoted? And he said, because we're only focusing on promoting women. And I had this moment where I legitimately wanted to like stick a fork in my leg and still smile and be like,
or throw your peppermint tea. That would have stung.
Gosh. But then I had a reflection. I think it was similar with this man who asked the question. I'm like, this is legitimately what he believes to be true.
Right.
So we actually need to have that discussion. Otherwise we'll perpetuate that that rumor.
Right.
So I actually took him through the data of how many women we had in the organization at the time. At that time, we had 27% of our population were women, and 28% of the promotions that had happened were women. And then once he saw that data, he's like, oh, okay. But realizing how much we had to talk about it and how many discussions we had to have for it to actually basically be on parity with the population that we had there.
Yeah.
And, for him to then to recognize his own bias in that moment. But if I had told him like, no, you're wrong, he wouldn't have had that learning moment. And the same with the guy who asked the question.
Right. Yeah. And that's where I think the data is really important, because on the surface, it can just seem so binary, but it's like, no, let's look and see how things are actually happening, how promotions are actually coming out for everybody. And so very eye-opening. So amazingly smart to do that. But it was a fun time. It was
great.
Fun panel. And here we are again. And I was going through your career since the last time I met you. And I was like, wow, you're just so many different industries. I mean, you have Stitch Fix, you have Salesforce, you have Uber, you have DraftKings. I know I'm missing like probably how many other ones we'll have it in your bio?
LVMH, but it was, everyone thinks it was multiple companies. It was all under the same umbrella. They just managed my career beautifully through that. So.
And LVMH again is
Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, but they own more than 70 luxury brands that we all know and love.
And all different industries that you've been in as well. So, and then also countries. And can you walk us through? I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I even get concerned if I have to commute to San Francisco, if I was to change a job, let alone go to another country and restart everything. Like, how do you, number one, how do you even go about making that decision to do that? And then how is that experience? And what have you learned?
For sure. So I would say that, first of all, like the decision to make the move, when I joined LVMH, so I joined Louis Vuitton. I was based in New York. I'd been working for Jimmy Choo, where
I love Jimmy Choo shoes. I have some.
I still have a closet full, and I still have all of my boxes, and I still all love them deeply.
I love them, but I don't wear them as much.
I wear them more when I'm sitting than when I'm actually walking.
They're good sitting shoes.
Also, like post-pandemic, we just got out of we got out of practice. I don't know if my feet can do this
but
anymore.
I still love them, and I'm looking at them, and I'll wear them ever so often.
Absolutely. Wedges are the answer. But when I was speaking to the team at LVMH, and I mean, I had a wonderful, I had sort of had to build a group of HR professionals around me when I was at Jimmy Choo, because I reported into the COO, and I wasn't learning enough in my own function and in my own area of expertise. And he was wonderful. He got me deeply engaged in the business, helped me be a commercial person, which I think has really helped my career. But I sort of built this network of other women who were predominantly in HR and fashion in the New York area, and met someone from LVMH who I refer to as my fairy godmother, a woman named Pauline Ruthman, who was the head of HR at Sephora, and she teases that she was the first employee. So she was the head of human resources before they had any human resources.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I was really intentional with them around the fact that I wanted an international mobility. So growing up, my father was a TV producer for sports. He did a lot of international broadcasting, and he took me traveling through the world with him. I was very lucky to benefit on being on the younger end of the kids. So he was further on his career, so it didn't feel strange bringing his child with him.
So did you go through different schools as you traveled with him?
A little bit.
Okay. Okay, so this isn't your first rodeo going to all these different countries. Okay.
Going to different places. And although my parents fundamentally believed that our greatest education came from seeing the world also, and understanding different cultures, understanding different people. So they were not afraid to yank us out for bits at a time. And I think today schools are very, very tough on that, but the level of learning that I had in that experience was incredible. And it created this wanderlust that will never go away. But I intentionally said to the team at LVMH when I was interviewing that I wanted an international mobility. And I understood that I would have to prove to them that I was worth investing in, et cetera. It was just part of our mutual commitment to one another. So, 4 years after being there, and I was actually offered something a year sooner, but I couldn't leave. My dad was unwell. I had an opportunity to move and go to Europe. So sort of initially Paris, and then because of tax law changes, a lot of people ended up moving to London. So when you think you're moving one place and you move to another, it's also a little bit of a strange adventure. But I named it. And they helped me make it happen along the way. but it's also it's a strange thing. And my first big move that I made was actually across the country. So it wasn't even an international move, and I moved from New York to San Francisco to work for Louis Vuitton. And at the time, I was married, and the day that I made my move was September 15th, 2008. Do you remember what happened that day?
I feel like I should. No.
It was the day the market crashed.
Oh.
So I am watching my movers roll my piano onto the moving truck and like take all my things. And I'm leaving a job that I really liked, but I knew this next experience was important. And my husband's staying home back there. And we were gonna make a decision later, making sure I liked San Francisco, liked the job, and then he would leave his job and move with me. And you're like, oh my gosh, did I just blow up my life? And then you're like, no, this is okay. And I kind of tucked into San Francisco. And I refer to my former husband as the artist formerly known as my husband, because he's a really wonderful, wonderful human being.
That is a really nice thing to say.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a very
amazing.
It's an unusual situation where we still have that
awesome.
relationship, and our families have connections. But he didn't ever move out with me, and we eventually split.
Wow.
And, in terms of the trade-offs that you make around some of these decisions and some of these big moves, and, we made that decision as a couple that I would take this role. And then, the situation changes, things happen, he had an illness in his family and he had stayed back. And you're like, did I just choose my career over my marriage?
Yeah.
And there's, there are exciting things about being in a new place and being in new countries, especially. There are new languages and new food and new things to see, but you move to a place and you have no friends, you have no support system. ITs that I'm like, I didn't know where to find the groceries that I wanted. FYI, in the UK, they call daikon mouli. It took me like 4 months to figure that out before I could make my daikon cake that I wanted to make to recreate the thing at the slanted door that I couldn't get when I was in London.
You tried to recreate. It was difficult.
Oh, I did. And then I was shredding a kilo of mouli on my
Wow.
living room floor. But it is, you sort of go through this curve of, extreme joy and excitement, and then, missing your friends, missing your family, Thanksgiving, when you get to that moment, which is so important in American culture. And when you bring your friends and your family together, and there it's just Thursday. And you're seeing all these posts from people are reaching out to you, wishing you a happy Thanksgiving, and you're sitting at your desk at an office and you're working on talent review, and you have to go home that night and just have dinner and go back to the office the next day. So there are a lot of trade-offs, and it's been incredible, and I'm very grateful for the moves that I've made and the things that I've experienced, the cultures that I've immersed myself into. And I lived in Japan for a while.
Oh, wow.
Which is just,
You could speak Japanese?
I can.
Let's hear it.
Hajimemashite, Linda desu. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Arigato gozaimasu. That's all I know. And I also know... Yeah, doi kashimashite. Don't touch my mustache. That's the way or Ohio gozaimasu and oishi a little bit. That's it. That's all I know.
You need to...
Kawaii, cute.
Kawaii. I was like...
Yeah, I was going to say
but you need to say it with like the kawaii.
Kawaii. My husband's going to be...
You're going to have to ask him what the definition is of sugoi.
Sugoi?
It means like 20 different things. So I'm really interested to hear what he has to say.
All right, as long as you don't get me in trouble.
No. It's not. It is not a bad word at all. I promise.
He's like, who told you to say that?
That thing is really cool. And you're like,
Sugoi.
No, it's a good. I'm always like, what does that mean? Because they use it in so many different contexts.
So, sorry, we'll stand you there trying to exercise some stuff. But so you've learned different languages to survive in different countries.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. But you went back you made it also a decision. You said, did I choose work or, marriage?
Yeah.
You mentioned that, but I'm sure it was so challenging during that time. And then also being at a new place and being alone. I mean, to just go through that separation if you don't mind.
Sure.
How that even, felt.
First of all, there's the sort of stigma. I grew up in a Catholic family. My grandparents, like full on Mary in the half-shell grotto in the backyard, 3 rosaries a day type of Catholics. I'm one of 5 children. I have more than 20 cousins on one side of my family. And I was the only one who was going to be getting divorced. I remember even, I remember being afraid to actually call it and tell my parents that this was happening, although I had talked to them through some of the challenges that had happened and all that. So it was wonderful, sort of the amount of support that they had, but also it's this scary moment. And I will say, Jimmy, the artist formerly known as, there are so many moments that, like, when we were together, and one of the reasons he's so exceptional is I'm a very independent woman, and I don't need anyone. And he knew I didn't need him, but he wanted to take care of me at certain moments anyway. And just knowing that in that moment when, like, oh gosh, wouldn't it be nice to just share the burden with someone, and then you suddenly don't have that, and moving to other new places and doing it on your own is scary. It would have been nice to have a partner in crime through those. But you learn a tremendous amount of yourself in those moments as well. And I have my sort of personal board of directors, or what I refer to as my old girls club too. I got tired of hearing about the old boys club.
Oh, I like that. And old girls.
The OGC.
OGC.
Live and in action. So really, depending on different family and friends, and not trying to do it alone. And so often we're trying to prove ourselves that we don't need help. And what are those moments that you do? I still have to remind myself, and I have some really good friends who are excellent at being like, ask for what you need. Don't just hope that somebody else is going to do it for you. Because those are the moments that I get frustrated too. I'm like, oh, I just wish someone would do this. My friend Trisha's like, just ask, we'll do it.
I remember my sister going through her divorce, and I was with her every step of the way. And even she didn't even know what she needed sometimes, also just going through that. And I think, everybody, you stay married, get divorced, whatever it is, it's an individual choice of what works, and it takes two people. But I also saw the transition of how happy she is too, and married, and it's all different for everybody.
Yeah, it's funny. My life has come a little bit full circle, and when we split, my niece, through his sister's daughter, was only 9, and she was my buddy, and I bought her first pair of tap shoes, and we used to dance together, and I used to go see her shows and everything. And I stayed connected loosely with his sister, but I hadn't spoken to the kids. And I recently took a job in Boston, and his niece lives in Quincy and works in Boston. So I saw her for the first time in 15 years. No. First of all, she is as amazing as I had hoped she would be. And second of all, we were able to kind of pick up where we left off.
That's awesome.
And also it's lovely to see even such a young woman and her understanding of kind of what happened back then, or lack of understanding, but still being really proud of the life I have. And she'd said that to me. She's like, I love this life for you.
Aww.
And it was just this moment of like, a level of forgiveness that I kind of needed.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. I mean, when you and your spouse split, you don't just leave that person, you leave their family and everything. And that would have been an important part of my life for, a decade. So
What a beautiful thing she said.
Oh, I mean, I can't even tell you how much it meant to me, and how much it means to me to be able to have a relationship with her again.
Yeah. And you needed that.
Yes.
That closure almost, but not. And then it's reopening a new way of having your relationship.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's strange. Like it's, I went through a period of a course of a year during an executive development program where we were focusing on the why of leadership, not the what, not the how, like, why do I lead? And within that, we had to come up with certain questions that we wanted to answer about ourselves, about our leadership during that time. And one of the questions I came up with is my life what it is because I've chosen for it to be that way, or because I've let it happen? And I spent months and months reflecting on this, thinking about it, trying to dig into it, making zero progress. And then one day I was reading a book, and I was standing in the bathroom in Japan, blow drying my hair, reading my book as I do, because I can't not multitask.
I'm always Thank you for saying that. I blow dry because that's a long time waiting for your hair to blow dry. I'm like, I could be swiping my phone and doing a whole bunch of stuff.
For sure. It's how I make sure I get like my Kindle reading in every day. You'll see my streak. It's very good. But in this book that I was reading, there was a passage written by the woman, and it was a biography or an autobiography. And she said, if you're lucky enough to wake up every morning and have food on the table and not worry about getting shot when you walk out the door, that life is a series of choosing between awesome things. So it's thinking about what awesome thing am I going to choose and what awesome thing am I going to leave on the table.
That is amazing.
So many times we're thinking like, did I make the good choice or did I make the bad choice? And it was like, there wasn't a bad choice. Like we live these amazingly privileged lives. And I had two great things ahead of me and I chose one. And either path, I don't know if you read Choose Your Own Adventure when you were little.
Yeah, I loved those
Yeah,
books.
yeah,
So
that's
good,
right. Now, ding.
Either path could have led me to something amazing. So I was choiceful. It's just there wasn't a bad choice.
That is such a good way to look at it. Thank you.
But
That's
you do have to
amazing.
make a decision at some point, and that's what you learn of what your preference is out of the two.
Yeah.
Or 3 or 4,
Yeah,
however
but you can
many
have a
are
lot
in
of
front of
great
you.
choices. I like it. Why do we always think that one's good and one's bad?
And it's there. I'm big into musical theater. I'm a big Sondheim nerd. And there's a line in Sunday in the Park with George, and it says, the choice may have been mistaken, the choosing was not. You have to move on. And sometimes with business leaders too, when people are struggling, and oftentimes I'm helping our leadership team through business problems. And it is that moment of like, well, which choice do I make? Do I make A or B? And I'm like, yes, pick
You
one.
do. You make one.
Yeah. And even in, one of the beautiful things about living outside of the US and working outside of the US is you learn how different cultures think through decision making, et cetera. One of my favorite things from French culture is they debate everything. Now, this can like drive you absolutely mad. And I walk in and I was in a leadership team that was basically all, I refer them as male, stale, and pale. There were many lovely human beings.
And pale. That is a first. I've never heard.
Male, stale, and pale.
Yeah, well, can we dive what the stale part?
They're old, crusty.
Yep.
No, I don't know.
You've got it right there.
Okay, wait, is it the crusty part?
Yeah. Old and crusty.
Crustables for you, Becky. Sorry, she loves those. Thanks.
But
Yeah, we're gonna eat again the same.
I know. Like, but people used to ask me, they're like, when I get interviewed or I have a question asked to me, like, what do I do? How do I respond to that? And I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter. If you're in a French work environment and someone asks you A or B, choose one and have a great case behind it, because no matter what you choose, someone else at the table is going to choose the other side
And debate it.
and you're going to debate, which is actually great. And you actually may not solve the problem that you walked into that room to solve, but you'll solve 7 other things. And then suddenly something will click on that topic while you're outside, me drinking tea, some of them smoking cigarettes, because yes, people still smoke. Don't know why. But, like just that working through, and somehow as an American culture, we're uncomfortable with debate. We think that it's confrontation.
Yeah.
You're like, no, you're actually digging in, and you can have like intellectual sparring, which can be really exciting and really fun. So, trying to then take that learning from that culture and see how I can add it to other working environments and cultures and help them become an even better version of themselves.
Wow, that is fantastic. And then I guess that leads into the role of HR, and that's been your primary role throughout your entire career. I think it'd be also good to share what that actually means for folks. We have many different listeners here, and then also it'd be interesting to know like some things that you've learned throughout like different countries. It's like, hey, does this policy work over here? Versus, I just could imagine it could be so different. So yeah, if you can,
For sure. And I mean,
enlighten us.
I always laugh when I hear people talking about like the HR lady, and it's
Yeah, because they're
usually
scary
like, it's
usually.
scary,
Or they're
yeah.
usually
You're
cringing
not
or-
on our side. I don't think so.
or they're like,
that's what they think.
they're unhappy about like, they think we like do payroll and party planning. And there's actually, if you ever watched The Unsinkable Kimmy Schmidt, they refer to Linda from HR. And I'm like, oh dear.
Oh God! Oh really?
They
They're all,
do.
okay.
They
That's
do.
me, but not me.
They do. But I think one of the things that's the perception of it is probably wrong, but it's evolved over time. I mean, once upon a time, it was the Office of Personnel.
Oh.
And then it was even, human resources. Now a lot of people call it, employee success or people operations or people in places, all of those different things, which actually I think as the function has evolved, the nomenclature around it has as well, which is kind of fun. But everyone will still have their point of view of like, HR is here to help me. No. HR is here to protect the company, and finding what that balance is. So for my team, first of all, our fundamental goal is to make it as easy as possible for people to do the best work of their lives. So how can we remove friction from the experiences, whether it's in terms of, how we talent manage people, how we think about building goals for an organization. How do we make sure those are super clear? How do we make sure our CEO has a great rallying cry that can bring people along? So there's a high communication component of it as well. So it's not quite just, we hire people, we fire people, we write people up for doing something wrong. There's some element of that, but that is that disciplinary piece is such a tiny part of what my team does. And a lot of it too is there's around how do we reinforce the right behaviors that are happening in an organization and start to nudge and continue to get more of that. And, in sports, when you're coaching someone, you never tell them what not to do because they only hear the thing. Mm-hmm. They don't hear the don't do this. They only hear so if you have a diver and they're in the middle of a dive and you say, don't look back, the thing they're most likely to do is look back. Mm-hmm. Therefore, hit their head on the board. That's not good. Coach, that's your fault. Tell them what to do. So I think in terms of reinforcing and redirecting the behavior, we oftentimes are so focused on telling people what they've done wrong and how to correct that. And that's what we think coaching is. But actually, that's not what it is. It's how do you make sure people understand, yes, you're spraying the fire hose in that direction. And do you see the impact of that and the outcome from a business perspective? So it's also connecting those dots. But in terms of are we there to protect the company or are we there to protect the individual? The reality is we protect the company by protecting the individual. How do we create this great experience for people where they are engaged? 99.999% of people come into work every day wanting to make a difference, wanting to do great work. People don't come in and say I want to screw this up. I want to break this. I want to do terrible things.
True. Yeah. True.
It's what happens over time where that trust starts to erode. And how do we sort of start to see ahead of that? How do we start to understand where the signals are of where that trust is at risk? And how do we make sure that we help solve that? And sometimes it's different interventions. Sometimes it's changing leaders, mixing up teams, making sure there's a level of diversity across the organization, which is really important so that you're hearing and you're seeing from different points of view. So what you're building in front of you. So lots that happens. And it's when I went through an exercise with my team, I had my team at an offsite last week. And we used design thinking and choice cascade as we were starting to build out our goals for next year. And we started with the business goals and sort of what are we winning at, or what do we need to win at? What has to exist to make that possible? How do we measure that? And then understanding what parts we touch as a people team. And there were very few. So we went through the sticky note exercise. I still love a good sticky note.
Oh, I have them everywhere on my desk. It just feels good to just write it and stick it.
Yes. I hope that I'm one of 3M's top customers with my flags and my sticky notes. But the team, they were surprised how many things we touched as a team. And when they looked at it, they're like, oh, we do. So there were very few Post-its that came down off of some of what happens from a business standpoint and how we drive that. So in that same leadership development program that I referenced earlier, we had to come up with what our own personal mission was. And if you've ever done mission vision work, everyone thinks you just sit down and you write your mission statement and your vision statement. I'm what they start as and what they end up as. OpenAI, very helpful actually in terms of building your statement over time.
It's my daily friend.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It is my,
I need to name it because I want it to be my friend because I talk to it all the time. Why does it have to just be?
What would you name it?
Well, it's named Gemini right now.
Well, that's the Google one that I use, Gemini. But I want to name it my own thing. It's like my own friend because I talk to him every day.
Absolutely.
Or her. I would like to name it a woman. Absolutely. One of these people like Rosie. Hey, Rosie, how's it going today?
That'd be
awesome.
Fantastic. Maybe mine will be Ruth.
Yeah, yours would be Ruth. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
She's on my
suggestion.
That's it. She's on my laptop. I have a sticker for every day to remind me to be fierce, be kind, be a velvet hammer.
Velvet hammer. I like that.
Yeah. Well, you have to make things out. But in my personal mission, it was, to cast this perfect ensemble and direct magic. Because when you're building teams, it's not about having, and I'll use a sports reference here, you can't have like 10 David Ortizes on a baseball team. It's not going to work. Like the chemistry is not going to be there. You're going to be over-indexed in certain skills. It's like, what is the right grouping of people? What is the right matchmaking that happens? And then how do we help them do all of the right things that are actually going to create incredible outcomes for the business and incredible experiences for everyone who's there.
So it was casting the right ensemble
Cast the perfect ensemble and direct magic.
I like that.
And I like that direct magic. I mean, you're talking about people. And I think as a business leader, the people is what drives the whole business forward and creates that impact. So you're right. You need to have the right people in the right place. So I can imagine that whiteboard, all those stickies, you touch everything in order for those business outcomes to actually happen.
For sure.
Yeah. Have you seen some, I guess it took you some time, or maybe within your career, you're seeing where it worked or it didn't work. And you're like, okay, we need to make sure this happens. Do you have any stories to share?
Oh gosh.
I'm sure you have a ton, but
I do.
But yeah, where it's like, hey, that didn't work out, and this is what we learned from it.
For sure. And oftentimes, I refer to people as being miscast when they're in a wrong role. And I have an example of a leader who's a tremendous leader, super successful, and then they're like, oh well, we're going to give that person this job next, and this this very highly sought after job. And we put them in that role and they did fine. They were, as my childhood teddy bear would say, meh. They were meh. And it's like, you've taken this person who's been so successful along the way and suddenly they're not. And a lot of companies will react and say, oh, they're over their skis or we pushed them too far. No, we put them in the wrong role. And in this instance, this is a person who their superpower was taking a steaming pile of crap and turning it into gold. Mm-hmm. So if you give them an established business, so sort of, in this case, we gave them a large portion of the enterprise business in the sales organization. And what they were great at was taking some of the like fledgling things or some of the broken teams or things where we had done an acquisition and the integration wasn't going well and ended up moving him over to one of those and like once again flourished. And now it's great because we actually named that and called that out. And we had that discussion with him. But so oftentimes you're wanting to take this star and give them this role that's really highly elevated, and that might not be the right one for them. And you see it happen over and over.
I've seen it happen so many times in my career where it is, because it can be confusing to so many. They are a rock star and they're doing so fabulous, and then you promote. But then what you're doing is when you're promoting, you're putting more and more scope to them. And then all of a sudden, like you said, the problems, they're all different. But then are they thriving in that environment? No, like you said, they're still great. It's just not a great fit at all. And I think that's hard to sometimes realize, and then it takes a little bit too long. But I'd be curious on the flip side of that individual. I found in my experience that they're usually thankful at the end. They didn't even realize like, oh, I don't like this. I didn't know. But then they just feel like they have to continue forward. So I think allowing them to make that pivot in a successful way is okay. But people, I don't know if you've seen this, but I also feel like people look negative upon it. Oh, that person was promoted here. Now they're over here. Oh, they must suck.
They must not have done well.
They must have not done well. And all these assumptions are made. So
And it's also like what really like brings you joy in your work. And as you go further and further in your career, I believe that, there's a split between what you do for your salary and what you do for your soul. And the further you get into your career, you better be doing more soul work. If you're not, or if you're fully coin operated, cool, you do you. If not, like at that point in time, these are the paths that you should be taking. And it's not always the sexiest job that's out there. It's like, what is that piece that really drives me and really gives me joy? And actually that's going to be where you're going to be most successful. And also it's really important that an organization thinks about, I refer to it as bubble wrap. Like what support systems do we need when we put someone in a new spot, when we're stretching someone or trying something different? How do we make sure we have an open and honest conversation around what that person wants? Companies are like notorious for doing succession planning and never asking the person, is this your ambition? And even geographically, they're like, oh, we'll move this person here and that's fine. I'm like,
wow.
Have you asked them? Have you talked to them?
Yeah, they have a spouse who has a job. Their kids are, they have one child who's a sophomore in high school. This might not be the right time to move.
Yeah.
Like, ask that question. And we sometimes behind closed doors play chess with people without really thinking through the full human.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you're not necessarily making the right decisions. And there are also all these preconceived notions around, gender roles in a family and in a household. When I was living and working in Japan, we were carving territories for a sales organization, and there was really like plum role. And there were some names put forward, and I put forward the name of a female sales executive who was awesome, who used to be on the treadmill next to me at Orange Theory. Orange Theory in Japanese. It's very fun. And, oh no, she can't do that role. I said, oh, what's wrong? Capability-wise, success-wise, size of deals, partnerships. Oh no, she has a family. I said, okay. Well, no, she needs to be home to take care of her family, and this requires a lot of travel. And then when we were looking at the other candidates for the role, I'm like, well, doesn't this person have a family? Oh, yes, but his wife will take care of the family. And it's interesting because you're dealing with years and years and years of like societal norms and cultural norms. And, I'm like Guy Jen, I'm like the blonde white girl coming in, telling them how to do something differently. And I have to be respectful for what exists culturally there, but then try to
break through a little bit.
Yeah. And it's how do you find those breakthrough moments, and how are you patient? You have to be deeply patient and like think about the long game and what is going to get us there in the long term versus like, I need to win this battle right now. Yeah. So
you're I've seen that so much time and time again where, we talk about succession planning, to your point, but then there's also choices like this example that you just shared where someone has decided that this is the person that's going to be the successor, but have we thought about everybody else? And so I'd be curious to know how you've seen different processes. I've seen some people where it's like, no, they're appointed and you're planning that they've been working in the organization for 2 years. So it only makes sense that they're now the successor because I've been grooming them for the last 2 years. Then there's other policies that we've tried, done back and forth that in my experience where, hey, we should make the role open and anybody should apply. But then sometimes I'll be honest that I feel like, is that just like a fake thing because you already made up your mind and then you just open it up so everybody can apply, but then there's that bias no matter what, you're just looking good on paper. Yeah. And so I just would love your perspective on that, of what you see is working or not working, because I've seen it done a million different ways and I still feel that most of the time somebody has made up their mind.
Right. Yeah. So. And I mean, my answer will be a data point of 1 or so take that all with a grain of salt. But I do believe in opening the role, but also being transparent that we do have a successor or we do have a succession pool. But the important thing is then you understand who actually wants that role or who would want that role. And the problem is if you just put that person in, then there's invariably going to be the like, well, I never even had a chance and no one thought about. So first of all, going deeper in, like, how are you making sure you're having really meaningful career conversations with people along the way? So you do know the people who want some of those, and how do you encourage people to name what they want? Like a lot of my career has also been made possible because I've named what I've wanted. Have I always gotten it? Heck no.
Heck no, absolutely not.
I've had to learn the value of the word yet. I did not get it yet, and that doesn't mean I'm never going to get it. And like regroup, what is this thing? But within that, making sure you're giving people space to be ambitious and talk about that and to know where you should think about placing them, but also the importance of opening that role. People do put themselves forward and even say like, okay, I understand there's someone else, but the next time this role comes open, or you also get an opportunity to meet this person in a way that they're putting forward the best of them. And you may be like, oh, well, okay, that role's done, but holy cow, they'd be amazing for this. And then you create another great opportunity. So I think it's transparency on both sides. So saying, yes, there's a role open. Yes, we do succession planning here. And actually, we think about it for all of you too. We want you to talk about it more. And we still want to talk to people who could be interested in this because we don't know all of the things. And every once in a while, actually, that named successor that you had, also, you go in and you're like, oh, we're just going to give that role to person X. They don't want that role.
Yeah, that's true.
And then you're like, oh crap, what am I going to do? But then actually I've met 4 other people who are all super qualified and really want that role, or that person moves out of a role, person moves in. And organizations are changing so quickly. I heard an economist talking the other day, and he was saying the amount of change that we've seen in the past 25 years that we're going to see in the next 3.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I mean,
That's a lot of change. A lot of opportunity too.
Right. So, all of these incredible jobs, you think everything is stagnant. And, when you're in that moment and you don't get something, this is the world and I didn't get this thing and this is no, it's like everything's going to be different like 4 weeks from now.
That's
You'll
true.
have a new thing that you're going to be grateful you didn't get that thing because now you have the opportunity for this.
And like the best jobs that are going to exist 3 years from now don't even exist.
Yeah. Or people decide to leave. I mean, there's so many things that can absolutely happen. And I love your approach on the transparency aspect. And then also, I always call it planting the seed, because even those jobs that are fewer as well, it's like, if I didn't plant the seed and if I didn't tell anybody about it, like it's definitely not going to happen. And you can't guarantee that it's going to happen in that particular apply, but maybe it'll happen 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 7 months. But if you didn't do that, then you wouldn't have that type of opportunity at all. They wouldn't even know. They wouldn't even know. So I think, but I love your transparency part, because that's probably the thing I haven't seen, because it's like, we're doing it, but there's no transparency. That, let's be honest. Let's be honest.
And I do love the opening up roles, because you do get those gems that come out that you weren't expecting. Like I ran women at LinkedIn for a while, and we had 12 roles that we were wanting to hire for in my new tenure, right? And I'm like, okay, let's just open it up, get however many people. Me and my co-chair ended up interviewing. We had conversations with 72 people who applied for these 12 roles. And we ended up creating enough to have a team of 34, because everybody came to the table with so much passion and energy and different expertise. We're like, ooh, we could use that and actually create this thing. And you get so much more out of it as the person hiring that role too, and they get more out of it because they have more opportunity that's opened up. So you don't want to kind of pigeonhole how you're going to fill roles or how they're going to be eligible for a role in that way. It's better for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the transparency thing also I've yet to have it bite me in the butt. I'm always scared when I'm super transparent. You're like, you post the thing about the fact, I was working in retail for some time. And of course, as the market was coming back down a little bit and softening, the tech market was, but I mean, the retail market was just getting absolutely annihilated. And if, you look at the market cap of some of these companies that are doing $14 billion in annual revenue, and their market cap is like $650 million. You're like, how is this possible? But just sort of the belief in this. And people are saying, oh, my stock is worth less. What are you going to do to fix it? Of course, the answer I want to give is, well, when the share price goes up, I don't take money back from you.
Right.
It's part of, variable compensation and the risk associated with it. But it is real. And it's, again, like stepping back and realizing part of wellness, I think, is financial wellness and people feeling secure. I mean, that level of security is so important. But we were at a point in time where, our share pool was essentially depleted. Our cash situation wasn't awesome, but we had some, and we were able to come up with a small solution. And I remember putting the announcement out, and we were going to have an all hands the next day, so I would be able to talk live to people. And I posted, and it was a big Slack organization. So I posted on Slack, and I was at the airport in Dallas on the way to a wedding in Florida. And my little brother was with me, and I posted it. I was like, oh, I called my little brother Kai. I'm like, oh, Kai. I'm just waiting to get shot. And I was waiting, and I was looking for the reactions. I'm like, there's going to be like hate mail about me. I'm blind. And everyone just kept saying, thank you. Thank you so much for being honest with us. Because I took them through, this is our real situation. This is how collectively we can get ourselves out of this situation. Right. But this is the reality. This is what we thought through. This is what we wanted to try to do. And, we're, as leaders, people think you have to give people messages that they want to hear. And with sort of the volatility in the world, and we started to see this in data back in 2016, employees more and more, they just want to know the truth. They want to know what they're walking into every day. Because when you walk out of the door, whether it be virtual or real of your office, the world is so unpredictable at this moment. How can we make life at work as predictable as possible and still really fun and exciting?
Yeah,
So,
of course.
but how do they feel secure? So, coming back to transparency around open roles and succession, like that's all part of that.
Yeah, and right now in the tech industry, right, with all the layoffs, everything that's going on, and I went through some of that with LinkedIn, no longer with them, but it was just a crazy, crazy time. And talk about blind. I just do not install that thing because it's hard. But then as an HR person, you kind of need what people are saying.
I look at it before I go to bed every night. It is my toxic habit.
I know.
It's the worst.
You have to be so careful. I'm like, things have been said. I'm like, I'm not listening. I'm not watching. But when we're going through this moment right now in the tech industry, there's so much chatter about how people are doing layoffs. How are they making that decision? And I would be curious from your lens what you've seen and maybe the approach that you've seen is working or not, because I've also seen very painful approaches where, hey, we should just actually look at our management layer. Let's like slice everything across. And then like now you just created a new organization that is like, does this really set the team up for success? Like so many layers, so many managers, and then that's an exercise in itself. And then who are you choosing at the end of the day? And then at the output of that, what does your diversity look like? And then you hear in headlines like DEI, all this stuff is being, undersourced or ending. It just, there's a lot of shakeup that's happening right now. So I would love your perspective on that. That'd be great.
And again, I mean, these are real human moments, and like there's sort of a balance between, okay, what's the case study and what do we need this to look like on the other end? And that's really important that you think about like, what does the organization on the other side of this need to look like, also need to feel like, because everyone's going through, it's like, someone's breaking up with you and you weren't prepared to be broken up with, and what that feels like for everyone's friends who are all around. So there's the business aspect of it. There's the human and cultural aspect of that. So sort of how you approach it. And sometimes there are financial implications that you don't have a lot of control over. As an HR leader, sometimes you just get given a number by the finance team. Hopefully, if it works well in an organization, you're having those discussions and you're thinking through. But sometimes it's like, here's your target. And oftentimes companies will just try to let the pain be felt evenly across the organization, but that's actually not the right solution to that, because we might need more of this and less of this, or what are the trade-offs that we're willing to make collectively as a business, as an organization, to decide what we're going to do and what we're going to not do. And some of the pressure around doing a reduction in force, a RIF as we call it, sometimes you have time pressure. So if you're going to really do like a deep level of really good org design coming out of this, you need many months. And sometimes you don't have that. And, the opposite side is like everyone just has to figure out 10% of their people to cut. And you've got to try to find that like rapid design that's kind of the in-between to be able to do that. And it's really hard when you're talking to leaders to get them to not talk about people and to talk about roles. Like, what is the role that you need? Because when it gets down to the individual human, there are so many elements of, but I need this person. I'm like, let's talk about what work needs to be done, how that needs to be done. Then we can talk about who. So, figuring out sort of what the structure is on the other side. And this is the way you can like live and go to bed every night as an HR person too. Because you're like, okay.
I was going to say, is that pretty hard sometimes?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. One of the first people I laid off, she had been, it was early on in my career. I was 26 years old. She'd been at the company for 27 years.
Wow.
And she was laid off not because she was doing anything wrong. Yeah. We actually had to shut down the retail part of the business and keep the wholesale side going. And the person who was going to do the layoff was, senior to me and on the business side. And the night before, I was just going through all of the details, and I said, okay, well, how is Barb getting home? We were in New York City and she lived in Queens. And he's like, oh, she'll take the subway. I'm like, this woman has spent more than my entire lifetime at this company. Yeah. And you're going to expect her to like walk out with her box and hop on like the Q train?
Oh my goodness.
So I'm like, I will do the layoff. So I just had this moment of like, what is that level of humanity that we have in that? And that's like the piece in the how the layoff is executed.
The how, you're absolutely right. You can get it so wrong. So wrong.
So, and I was really proud. The the layoff that we had to do at Salesforce in August of 2020, in pandemic year, it's not simple. It was a large number of people because the organization was huge. So even if it was a small percentage, it was still a lot of folks. And we had individual conversations with every single person. Wow. Now, I've seen organizations that send out emails, and I've had a company who went back after I left and who had done it that way. And I'm like, no. And, for me, it's really about first thing you focus on is the people who are being impacted. Second thing you focus on is the people who are remaining, because they're going to be really affected by how you treated their peers. They'll forgive you for not talking to them for a couple of hours and for there being like a little bit of painful ambiguity, but they will not forgive you for treating their colleagues poorly.
Yep.
And then third is external. And a lot of companies first, they want to make sure they get the right external message out. I'm like, if you do this really well, that message will go well. You have to have a reactive statement ready and everything. Sure. But how you treat people on their way out is so critically important. So I mean, I understand it's hard to get to as many people as you need to, and there's uncertainty during that day. But like, we did it over the course of, because of time zone differences and everything, over the course of 24 hours. But even in North America, in like a really short window, we had to prep managers, leaders to have conversations that were hard. And yes, you do, in many cases, you have a script, but that's it, and you can tell the person, I have a script and I'm reading it to you because there's information here that I do not want to get wrong. And you can be human, but actually have those like specific words in there. But just the fact that I am having, and honestly, once you say to someone, and I'm sorry, your employment here is ending today, they don't hear much of the rest of it anyway.
It's true. It's like stone face. It's like not unexpected. Yeah.
But then like I have a former colleague who was at the company for over 20 years. And when there was a layoff that was done later on, he got the same email as everyone else. And you're just like, he's been there almost since the beginning.
Have some respect. Treat him like a human, and like, thank you for all the work that you have done.
Gratitude for your tenure.
It's again back to the how, and then you could just, and it's unfortunate because I'm sure with that individual for 20 years, right? It's like now they left on like a low note. It's like, I gave my heart, blood, soul to this company for so many years, and that's how you treated me on the way out.
Yeah, and I mean,
not cool.
Coming back full circle to my like first layoff, that person referred me to my job at Jimmy Choo.
Beautiful.
So like I had this moment with her, which was probably one of the crappiest moments of her life, let alone career. And because of how we handled it and how we managed it, and treating her with a level of dignity and respect, and gratitude again for like all that she'd done, and helping her understand like, you didn't do this to yourself.
It's not about you. You're still amazing. This is the company. It's a business.
That's it. Yeah. So those things can lead to good relationships, stronger relationships. And when leaders are afraid to have tough conversations with people, actually, in many cases, it's what bonds you in a human experience. And in this moment, you talk about moments that matter. And, there's, in an employee's journey, there are roughly, people debate in different places, can be a little bit different, but about like 38 of them through. And people think the moment that matters is the conversation that you have with the employee after they've just been promoted. Nope, not at all. It's the conversation that you have with someone when they didn't get the promotion. How do you have that conversation? And so often, it's uncomfortable. So a leader just wants to kind of like gloss over it and go to the next thing and tell you all the wonderful things. Like a pretty squirrel.
Squirrel.
But it's like, how do you have real conversations in really human moments?
Yeah.
Has there been, because you've had such an extensive resume, right, that we're looking at of places that you've been and impact that you've had the chance to make, have there been moments, I'm sure, where the values didn't line up for you and you just had to say, I'm not on the same page and I'm going to exit stage left?
I did. And, I hold myself accountable in my like diligence going into the organization as well, because I had a personal relationship or a professional relationship with, and knew them well, with the spouse of a leader. And that person was, was a CHRO. So someone that I met through an acquisition, and we were head to head at the table and all that. And when I went in for the role, actually, her husband didn't realize that we had worked together, and that, came out during the process. But I made an assumption that there was a deep level of care and investment in the HR function and in that world, and sort of in what I valued. And we definitely talked about it in the interview, and there's a lot of that. But when you saw how everything was operationalized on a day-to-day basis, and it's the hardest thing when someone disappoints you. And I remember saying to someone at some point in time, like, oh, I'm so frustrated. And they said, are you frustrated or are you disappointed? And I'm like, because frustrated leads to angry, disappointed leads to sad. I'm like, I am disappointed. And just seeing how they operated on a day-to-day basis, and that the values that were sold to me were not the values that were being lived every day. And I had to make a decision to walk away. And it's hard because, I was deeply committed to my team. Like, I loved my team there so much. I was texting one of them in the car on the way here today. And what our vision was, and what we were actually doing, and what we were changing, what was happening. And we were bringing your business through a transformation. And by transformation, I mean turnaround, like taking a business who's likely to become possibly bankrupt or delisted from the NASDAQ or whatever that may be. And it's hard. And you realize again in your, what failure did I have in this moment? And then therefore, like, for the people that remain at this company, that I'm not able to change that. So what I experienced from a values perspective, and that's the thing that's hard to walk away from. It's like, no, I'm going to stand tall. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep fighting the good fight, because like the rest of the company believes in these values, even if this leader doesn't.
And it almost feels like part of your role. Like you're there for the people. You're supposed to fix this, Linda.
See, I'm there for the people. It's not just for the company. And that you have those moments. And I mean, sometimes it's, would another person have been more effective in that and in changing the mind of this individual? And you've got to be able to say that. And part of like, I came here to do this, and I'm not succeeding in the way that I had anticipated. And I think it's someone else who's going to have to bring us to this place. And, you own a piece of that as an individual. I didn't do my diligence, but, could I have operated differently that would have shifted the individual? I don't know. I don't go home and blame myself every night for that one not working out. But also I need to reflect it. Yeah. What my approach could have been. But yeah, and then you have to walk away, because if it's not living and breathing your values. And I've had situations where I was worried that, we talk about values as organizations, and when I was at Salesforce, I was probably 6 months in. And there was a senior leader who was doing something that was not living by our values. Let's put it that way. And, I sort of looked into the whole situation. I spoke to all the people necessary to understand and really have fact-based, evidence and patterns in there. And I remember going to my boss, who's the amazing Cindy Robbins, and talking to her about this. And we bring it forward to Mark, to our CEO. And I'm saying, like, oh my gosh, I'm so going to get fired for, suggesting that this person who's been super successful in sales and is one at the top. And the answer was, doesn't live up to our values, can't be here. Like, that's the ticket for entry. And that just reinforced, I'm like, holy, I mean, that bought like a lifetime of loyalty for me. But just to see that is possible, and how important the how is. So coming back to the how, like that's great. You can sell as much software as a service as you want, but if you don't live and breathe our values, this is not the place for you. Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
So you can have leaders that are all that.
Yeah. Wow. Congrats. And I like that ticket for entry.
Yeah.
That's key. And so as you've been working at these different companies and making choices and deciding to go here or there, like, you've had several different types that you've worked at in different industries, but how are you effective in certain periods of time? Like, or how you just described a situation where you realized it wasn't going to work. And so I don't even know what that time frame is for you, or then also like, how do you decide, like, hey, I hit my impact mark, or is it just different with every company? I imagine, but it's just you have a wealth of experience across many companies. We got to ask, like, how do you go in there and like make your imprint, have an impact, and then on to the next?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's each move that I make. It also has to do with like, what is the stage the business is in at this point in time, and what is my superpower that I can bring to it, but also what do I want to learn and how do I want to stretch myself? You know, for a while I was at an organization that was just like up and to the right all the time, and you're like, you're rocking it, and then you have this moment you're like, am I really good because I'm good, or am I only good because everything else around is good?
Because the company's doing, that's a very excellent point, because you see the company up and to the right, and it's like, oh yeah, you can be a great leader because everything's like going well, the numbers are good.
Right.
And when things start going down, like that's when you see true leadership, actually, if they're able to like handle the, what's happening, react, make decisions, hard decisions. Absolutely right.
So like I have to take that moment also to say, okay, I need to test myself in something that's not, in something that's hard. That's how you actually build muscle. That's how you build perspective. And you can also, you've seen what you think has made something go up and to the right all the time. And then you're like, well, if we just do this. And then, when you're going industry to industry, what worked at one place isn't necessarily going to work at another. And when I joined one of the, I let my team know early on, like, these first 90 days, or one company was 100 because what 90 days would have been Christmas Eve. And I'm like, not making any big decisions on Christmas Eve. Just know that I'm not really going to change anything, because when new leader comes in, everyone wants to know what is the org, what is the structure, and if I made that decision on day 1, 10, 15, 30, I would make bad decisions or subpar decisions at best, where I take that time, and it's hard because you want to prove like the impact that you can make and what it do.
You're better to like wait, listen, and learn. But they're like, I'm here, I'm going to make all these changes. Actually, and like you said, they're going to be wrong.
And sometimes people ask you some of those like questions early on. And I'm like, okay, with the insight that I have, but like my current company, I came in and we have 168 people on the senior leadership team. It's a lot. We're very inclusive. And within that, I took the time and I met every single one of those people one-on-one. So I spent 5 hours a week for 2 months meeting each of those people. And I would ask them the same 4 questions, which were, what's the most important improvement we've made in the last year? Where do you find friction in getting your job done? What are you most proud of? And if you had one ask of the ELT, what would that be? And just trying to learn through a lot of different lenses, a lot of different functions, a lot of different countries, et cetera, different cultures. So making sure that I'm looking at that, and because you go into a company and you think you know what problem you have to solve, and then you start to learn, okay, yeah, it's kind of that, but it's really that, that, and that. So in making the moves, I'm always looking at where can I add value at this moment in time. I've scaled a lot of organizations, whether it was startup. So Jimmy Choo was a total startup actually when I was there, believe it or not. We got paid in shoes. No, we did.
Really?
We got paid not very well, and then we got a lot of free shoes. So I am not sad.
We need to check out your closet. You gotta send us that picture.
If you're a European 39, like I'm your spot.
Yeah, 38. Oh, damn it.
That's right. Stuff a little pad in the back.
Okay, but we can figure this out, because sometimes you need a little comfort. Your feet get swollen.
That's right.
So okay, we'll figure it out.
Absolutely. And then I've worked. I joined Salesforce at 25,000 people, and I left when it was like peaking towards 80,000 and above. So that sort of journey, although I started in EMEA and we were about 3,000 people. So it was also like that. And you also have to think through like, what are those sizes and stages of organizations that I love? And whether it's, it's struggling, or I do not mind a regulated industry. I've worked in rideshare. I've worked in wines and spirits. Right now I work in sports entertainment, gaming, gambling, iGaming, et cetera. And those are tricky too, because you're navigating a lot of different challenges. Right now we're certainly regulated on the gambling side. We're also regulated financially because we have people's money. We hold people's money through various things. So like trying to understand what impact I could make, and also sort of what experiences I bring with me, but also what different experiences that I bring, because not every company is different. And if you're just trying to use the playbook that we used at Uber when we were going from 1,400 to 10,000, right now in an organization, it's a bit over 5,000 people, we're scaling. We're also learning to be a grown-up organization. We don't actually have to be as scrappy as we were once upon a time. We are still super scrappy in a beautiful way so that we can, think through being agile, et cetera. But what things really have to be in place, what structures have to exist, how do we continue to be an organization that has incredibly strong relationships and drives a lot of our success in relationships. But when it gets to be so many people, how do you connect the right people together? So just trying to figure out like what lenses I need to see the business world through and making sure that I never get myself into a moment where I don't realize the breadth of what happens at different companies. And I'm constantly trying to learn from people at different companies and in different industries and in different organizations. Because there may be something done at a super traditional company where a lot of tech companies would say, we'll never operate. They're doing something brilliant that you can take and bring in here. So even my personal board of directors and my groups of folks and industry leaders or HR leaders, how are you thinking about this? What have you tried? What have you done? And sort of Frankenstein a solution together that feels right for what this organization is at the moment.
Yeah, I love that. And basically what you're doing is data gathering completely when you go into a company with all the people, which is great before you make any decisions, and then outside the organization, see what other people are doing so that you can actually then figure out and synthesize all that data and make the best decision that you can with all of it.
So the best decision you can. It's not always the right one.
No, it's not. but
it's a decision.
But at least you did your work. You did your homework rather than I've seen other things too where you just make decisions. Do you think about how this would actually play out or ask somebody else for help?
Right.
My goodness. So what? That might be some internal stuff that I happened with me, a little baggage, PTSD.
Ask for help.
Anyways, I don't know, but I'd reach out to you first. Thank you. Let's see. And we don't. So other. What is your current focus right now? I mean, we talked about all this breadth of experience. You're now at the DraftKings, totally different industry. Is that your current focus? Any other things you want to share?
Sure. So I mean, I joined this organization. I wasn't necessarily looking to make a move, but the things that were really appealing to me. So my dad was a television producer for sports, and I grew up in this world of sports. And he started doing this back in the 70s. He created the slam dunk contest. It was a PR stunt when he worked for the ABA. And then a lot of what you saw on TV and how you experience sports were a lot of his innovations. Which was really cool. And I remember him telling me, Linda Marie, someday, and this was probably in 1994 when we had our, cable channel box with the long cord table. One day you're going to be able to order up whatever you want to watch on TV at the moment. And I'm like, okay. And I was thinking about when you go to a hotel and you want to rent a movie on the hotel screen, and that would be it. Never imagining what sort of the future viewership would be. And I have an opportunity to create what the next iteration of sports entertainment is and how we experience a game, how we experience this world. So there's something very legacy driven to me. And, I'm one of 5 kids. None of us followed in my dad's footsteps. Oh, wow. And there's this moment where I'm like, I can actually pull that thread on. So that was really important to me. And also taking an organization at this point in time, they've been super successful thus far. And, being part of this next journey and helping our leaders think through this next horizon and how do we make this future-proof for the next 20 some odd years as the industry is shifting and changing and growing. So it's around, how do I leave a tremendous group of leaders behind, and how do I help them become incredible leaders that will often, everyone attrits at some point in time. Sure. So many of them will be at other places, and how can they bring that incredible leadership? But my big focus internally also is around talent management. Because I fundamentally believe your greatest ROI is on your humans. And with that, how do we make sure we're really tapping into the best that everyone can have? And what does that mean in terms of how we operate and how we create goals and what structures are in the organization and how we teach people to give feedback? I mean, we've gotten into this world in tech where everyone has grown so quickly. And then suddenly, and you're a manager, but do we actually teach people how to be managers? And do we recognize and reward people for being great leaders? we've taught people how to manage work, not how to manage humans. So how to humanize that again. I also have a massive focus around women in business and women's careers. Part of it is, my mother and her sisters worked and did things in a way that made my career and my life possible, and that of my sisters. And I want to think about how can I make the workforce and the workplace an even better place, an even more welcoming place, an even more equal place for my young nieces, the youngest who are 6 and 9. And how does that change? And we think that progress has been made in many ways, and then we see where challenges still exist. I was speaking to women in orthopedics last Saturday, and I mean, these are women who are incredible, who are at the top of their game, who went to top universities and medical schools and are top institutions and top spine surgeons in the U.S., and to still see what they deal with every single day in the workforce, or, where there's bias against them. And I'm like, we need women in medicine so badly.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'm like, as a woman who goes to a doctor, like,
yeah,
I need to make sure that the data that's included in some of the research happens.
You think like menopause or something like that?
That would be good.
Maybe a small detail that we're all going through.
I'd appreciate that. Yeah. I'd appreciate a little focus there. Thanks. And to see also, where they've become, they feel like they've become a shell of who they were. And I'm trying to understand, like, do we lose some confidence and some spark over time, or are we seeing it differently generationally? Because then I see really, really amazing things in some of the young women coming into the workforce. I see where women are able to set boundaries in ways that I think I never felt I was able to set, and to see that change. So, like, I feel a deep responsibility to leaving the workforce, leaving the world in a better place for a generation behind me. And, how I do that in my own company, and then, trying to influence externally. I'm joining a board of an organization called Electives, which is this incredible way to rethink learning, and how do we learn, and from whom do we learn? And in moments where learning is becoming like dehumanized in many ways, and I'm like, if I have to sit through another like corporate training or another e-training where I'm like clicking through and just hoping the thing keeps playing and I can take the test at the end.
Exactly. I always do that trick, do over here, multitask, like dry my
doing
hair.
my dishes. Yeah, that's great. So, even trying to think through how to help other organizations shape what their product is and what people's experience, and how that really shifts how we experience work. We spend so much time at work, and again, we're not there just because we have to, or I hope we're not, or so many of us. And certainly I'm privileged enough to be able to go do something that I love. And how can we help more people do that, and more people really thrive?
I love that. And I love that you said that you joined a board. So maybe that's the first of many for you in the future.
My future. So my longer distance future. Because I worked in wines and spirits, I have great love of what it takes to create wine. And everyone thinks of wines and spirits, especially at Moet Hennessy, we had Krug and Veuve Clicquot and Dom Perignon, and it's so glamorous. No, you're farming, and there's something so incredible about being connected back to something that has been happening in a similar way generation after generation after generation, and getting to be part of that next generation of that. So I have some vines and some land. So
nice.
my old lady life, which is hopefully not so many years in the future, I will never be able to stop working in some way, shape, or form, but to do that through board work. I refer to it as being a plural executive, or advising other organizations. And then I'll be pruning my vines in my caftan,
or your your Jimmy Choo shoes, and crushing grapes.
That's it.
Is that what we're envisioning here?
I want to be kind of like a very chic Mrs. Roper.
I like it. I like it.
Your caftan and your
It'd be good. Lucille Ball, that favorite episode of hers. Yeah,
absolutely.
Linda crushing. I can't wait it.
That's it.
Can't wait for
That's it.
Linda crushing. There you go.
Yes, and I've always wanted to crush it. Now I get to
crush
physically.
Literally. Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nice. Well, thank you for being here. And one of the things that we like to end the show with is any women that you'd like to pay it forward and uplift, and just do a little shout out of their name.
Absolutely. I have so many women who are surrounding me. First, I want to hopefully call out 2 women who have made my career possible. One by the name of Edie Steinberg and one by the name of Beatrice Wenzel-Lux-Kronig, who were 2 phenomenal women who took a chance on me. So those are 2 that I would definitely like to call out. And then I also want to call out an incredible woman who has been part of my tribe. Her name is Eva Heffernan. She works at Salesforce. She is also doing a lot in the .org. So in the world where we're giving back a little more and helping organizations. And she is an incredible leader, an incredible mother with 2 children, one who has some intellectual disabilities. And yet what she brings to the world and brings to the workplace every day is incredible, and how she's bringing other women forward behind her as well. So I would like to lift up Eva.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing. That's
All right,
a wrap.
that's a wrap.
The biggest gratitude to thank those that are behind the scenes. Alex Sully, our creative director and producer. Becky Davis, our talented director of photography. Kristen West, our brilliant brand and design expert. And of course, thanks to all of you for making our vision of Humanize Her come to life.